and on behalf of the Clare Ladies Football County Board, I want to welcome you all here to tonight's webinar on becoming a better coach. I hope that you and your families are all doing well in these very strange times. Due to COVID, we're all learning to live in this new virtual world. But when things open up again, we would love to see you all visit our beautiful county here in Clare. And as a small token, I have 5 family passes for the beautiful Cliffs of Moher to give away here tonight. I think we'll give one to Valerie and Mick, and then I'll randomly pick 3 names out from the list of delegates that have registered and maybe announce it just before the end of the session. We've over 400 people registered to attend from all over Ireland. And indeed, we have one brave soul from Father Murphy's Club in London, and we have one from Boston Shamrocks in the States. So you're all very welcome, and it shows the interest that's in this topic. I think more to the point, it shows the respect and the very high esteem that our 3 speakers are held in across the LGFA and the GAA community. We're absolutely thrilled to have them share their experiences with us here tonight, and I'm sure that we will all leave here with a number of good ideas that we can try out once we get back onto the field of play ourselves. So thanks a million, guys, for giving up your time to be with us tonight. And can I also at the outset thank our hard-working secretary, Monica Callanan from Kilmahel, for setting up the Zoom call tonight, and also Anne-Marie Callanan from Curraclare and Sarah Cunningham from Kilmurray-Ibricken, who will be managing the questions later. The format for the evening will be quite interactive, so each of our speakers will speak for 15 to 20 minutes, but they'll deal with the Q&A at the end of their own particular piece as well. Because of the large numbers we have in attendance, we won't be able to turn on everybody's mic, so we will be using the question and answer facility, which is on the menu bar for those familiar with Zoom. Just type in whatever question you have, and then Anne-Marie and Sarah will group them and put them to our speakers at the end of their particular presentations. And then at the end, there'll be a further chance for a wrap-up if anybody has anything pressing. And I would expect that we'll all be finished here at 9:15, 9:30 tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. He's our own Clare Ladies Intermediate Team Manager, Evan Talty. Evan was only appointed in January, but he brings considerable experience from his role as a coach on the previous management team. And as manager of his own club, Kilmurray-Ibricken, he led them to win the Intermediate Championship last year, late last year as it happened. And so they'll be playing senior football this year once we get back onto the field of play. He has also had a successful playing career himself, so he brings many innovative ideas from the various coaches and managers that he had himself over the years. Tonight, Evan is going to talk about games-based approaches to training and talk us through some sample game plans, maybe that we can bring back and play ourselves. So over to you, Evan. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks, Sean. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for attending tonight. And I suppose, first and foremost, from my own point of view, it's great to be, I feel like a little bit of an imposter on such a lineup with Mick Bohan, who I think they're going for 5 All-Irelands in a row, and Valerie Mulcahy, who have, I think Valerie is 10 All-Irelands. So we're kind of starved of All-Irelands here in Clare, but hopefully we might put that right in the near future in both male and female football. So I suppose Sean has done all the introductions, and thanks for that, Sean. So my part is to speak about games-based coaching. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I fully believe in, and I probably only learn a lot about it myself as I go along because it's quite a new concept. But I'm kind of a sponge for information, and anyone, as Mick has found out this week, if you get caught on the phone to me talking about football, it can be quite a long conversation. So I suppose for me, as Sean said, I'm kind of fresh enough into coaching. It's nearly just trying to transition from one to the other at the moment, and from the playing days. So it's, for me, I'm studying a lot, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can. So I suppose first and foremost, what I had to look at for myself, and I think it's really important, is what kind of coach do I want to be? And often as players transition into management, I think we really try to, we're kind of focused and we're led from the coaches that we have been coached by, and we bring that forward. But I suppose that's not always the case. You know, it might or might not be the right or the wrong thing to do. So we have to figure out, do we want to go down the games-based approach? Do we know enough about it? Or do we want to stick to what we know it and do drills? Do we want to be traditional and not rock the boat and just do what was always done? You know, what everyone else did, sure, they didn't do too bad. Will we stick with that? Or will we try something completely new? Will we try bring something from other teams, other sports? Do I want to be interactive? So do I want to give kind of, I suppose, the players to have a say? Do I want to get feedback? Do I want to do all that? Or do we want to just go with the drill sergeant approach and you do what I tell you to do, and if you do that right, we'll achieve things? Do we want a player-led approach versus a coach-led approach? So are the players going to take responsibility and we're going to hand them over responsibility, or are we going to try and spoon feed them ourselves and we will do all the work and they'll just carry out what we want them to do? And I think what is success for me, like, you know, we're not all going to be a Mick Bohan and win 4 All-Irelands in a row, or we're not going to be a Jim Gavin. And it could be that we might be managing an under-8 team or a club team. And like, really, what is success like? For me, I suppose, look, everyone loves to win things and it's a great, but I don't think winning things should be the barometer of how good a coach you are. So really, if you leave the players in a better position than what you got them, I think you can't do a whole lot more than that at whatever level you're at. And I suppose what success will gain from that, then what will be. But I think if you go into coaching with the kind of bar set as if I don't win anything, I'm not a good coach, I don't think that's always the case, because I think there's a lot of great coaches out there that might not have won a whole lot. Then the next thing, I suppose, is knowing your team. And, you know, when I sat down and talked and thought about this, like, really and truly, is there any benefit of me going looking at what Jim Gavin is doing in Dublin, or Jason Sherlock is doing, or down in Kerry, what they're doing with their senior men's teams, and bringing that to an intermediate club team in Clare, or an under-17 boys team? It's not. I have to figure out what are the needs of my team and what are the standards that they're at. So if they're not inter-county standard players, why would I coach them and use techniques and use games that are not at their ability? So it's like, you know, it's the same as anything in school, the same way. You know, you're not going to teach leaving cert maths to first years, and it's the same in coaching your team. And again, what's success like for your team this year? So if you're over the Clare football team this year, is success staying in Division 2? It might be getting to a Munster final. If you're in Kerry, as Peter Keane is seeing at the moment, unless you win something, then you're not successful. So everyone has a different bar to hit, and I think it's understanding what is success for your team. You know, from my own point of view, if you look at it, the Clare ladies got to the semi-final last year, so we have to improve on that, or it may not be success. Kilmurray got promoted to senior from intermediate, so maybe holding senior status might be success. So there's different, I suppose, different levels that you're trying to achieve with each team, and what do they want to achieve more importantly than what you want to achieve, and what resources do I have at my disposal? So, you know, if you are on a budget with a county team, you might have certain resources where you might have video analysis, you might have a backroom team, or like most club managers, you could be coaching your club teams at underage, and you're the person that rocks up with balls, bibs, cones, you're the water bottles, you have everything. So everything is limited to what you have and what you can use, and you have to, I suppose, cut your cloth as it's measured. So for me, if it's at a higher standard and you have some of this, and you have stats from the last couple of years that might be available, and you might have huddle, or you might have video analysis that might be available, that's one great way to get know your team, because you can watch the players, the games that you mightn't have been to. You can see all the analysis and the stats that are done on them, and you have a very good bank of information ahead of you before you go into the team. But if you don't have that, and 99% of coaches won't have that, there's some simple things you can do. You can do a skills assessment, which, I look at the different ones around. There's loads of them online that you can take your players, your juvenile players out and do a skills analysis on them, left foot, left hand, right hand, and do the basics well and see where they're at. Or, to me, this is a really interesting clip that's up here, and it's part of a wider document. It's a tactical analysis. So if we just take one thing out of that, because I don't want to go through everything, and we look at defending. So am I going to go in, and there's 1, 2, 3, there's 5 columns in that, and column 5 being the highest level of tactical awareness versus column 1, the very basics that we start off with. So the very basics is marking. So I look at a defender. Do I know how they mark? Can they mark? Are they able to stand side by side, play from the front? And we try and assess, right, they can do that. Number 2, are they able to delay, shadow, prevent someone turning, pressurize without fouling? And then I see, if I only get to level 2, then I coach to level 2. I don't coach the swarm tackle. I don't coach trapping. I don't zonal marking, all this kind of stuff that senior intercounty teams are doing. If I go into a lower level team that aren't at that level, and I try coach that, I'm going to go nowhere because the players aren't going to be able to do it. So being able to, it's almost like in business or whatever you're doing, you do an analysis, whether it's a SWOT analysis or whatever analysis you're doing, you see what you have in front of you, and then you do your plan from there. And that's where I would go from into, I suppose, the whole, we can go in from there. Once we've that sorted and we have a plan put in place, we know who we're dealing with, then we can look into our games-based coaching. And for me, games-based coaching is, for a lot of people, it's not just starting a 15-on-15 game and going and play a match. Game-based coaching is kind of making sure that all players are being used all the time in situations where they have to decision make and they have to have interaction, and that there's some pressure put on their skills. Things like that will be games-based coaching to me. But it's different to everyone. Like if you look at soccer, games-based coaching is in every schoolyard in soccer. Like when I was in school in Quilty, we count up how many players we have. We throw down 2 jumpers, 5v5, 3v3, 6v4, all these kind of things. You're done every day playing soccer and you don't even realize it, but you're playing games, you're playing, small-sided games. And it's something that I feel the GAA, particularly football, it's interesting that I went to Flannan's in Innis and I've been to Kieran's in Kilkenny, and you will see hurlers holding hurleys all the time. They have to, like in some of the shops in Innis, there's notices up to leave the hurleys outside because they bring them everywhere to them. And it's the same, lads are out kicking balls playing soccer, but how often do you walk down the road or into the pitch and our lads playing football or kicking the ball, practicing outside the boot, inside the boot? It just doesn't happen in Gaelic football at the moment. So it's something that I think is something that needs to be kind of, maybe we need to try and make it cooler or make it more interactive, but that they practice their skills before they come to the pitch and before they get to training, that at least then, because it's very hard to do all that in an hour. But I think that's where other sports are kind of ahead of us in that kind of thing compared to Gaelic football. So this is what not games-based coaching is. And again, I think there's a time and a place for drills. And in order to achieve a certain skill level, you probably need to do a lot of drills to get there. And like what we would say is, when you do your matrix and you look at your tactical ability of your players or your skills assessment of your players, for me, and like it's something we're doing at the moment, I'm saying, I've asked all our girls who has footballs, if you don't have a football, we're going to get you a football. I'm couriering out footballs, and we're going to give them skills challenges, because I don't want to waste my time when we get an inter-county setup trying to teach girls who are playing inter-county football skills. They've plenty of time with the last 8 weeks, the last year, to be at home with a football, practicing their skills. But just in this clip here, it's running in straight lines. The players don't have to make a decision. There's no match-based scenario. You do what you got to do. You pop the ball, you go back to the end of the line, and you wait for your turn again. So there's no engagement, there's no challenge. It's not going to happen in a match. So why do we do it at a training session? So this is getting into how we implement a games-based approach to training. So first of all, we'll decide what we're going to do, but really and truly, all games in a games-based approach, in my point of view, and this is everyone has an opinion on this, and no opinion is right or wrong, because really and truly, as one manager said to me before, at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to stand up and explain myself at the end of the year to the board, and I'll do it my way, and whatever comes out of it, right or wrong, it'll be my way of doing it. So you call them together, and like you see in the photo there, lads or ladies, we're going to go out, we're going to play 6v6 here, play the way you're facing, 4 seconds on the ball, this is the game. Ask, do they understand what they're going to do? Yeah, why are we doing it? We want to move the ball fast, we want to transition quickly, and then we play our match. And what I will do is I'll call them in then after, it could be a 3-minute game, and we'll pause, reflect and correct. So we'll put it to the players. What did you think of that? How did you find it? If you were struggling with playing the way you're facing, what don't you understand about it? How can you correct your body shape to make sure that it works properly the next time? We go back into it again, we play the game again, and we'll do that 3 times in 3-minute games. And at the end of it, we'll end the game and we'll debrief. We'll have a chat between the players again in a player-led approach. They'll lead it. Sometimes what I might even do is send them off, and I won't come in at all, and we'll say, girls, you ask yourselves what was wrong there. And look, at the start of this, the biggest thing is how you question them. Because we all know, you call it, lads, what did you think of that? And they'll say, no one person will talk up, or 2 people will talk up, and maybe they're afraid to give the wrong answer. But eventually, over time, when they get used to it and confidence, and they grow a bit of confidence in themselves and in the approach, you'll see they start understanding why they're doing things, and they're not just doing it because as the coach, we tell them to do it. So and look, I just like this stuff for me, and I have a bit of time to do it, but I'd be a big believer in planning my training sessions. And look, it's all fancy looking there, but you don't have to do it. It could be a scribble down on a piece of paper, it could be put into the coaching WhatsApp group. But what we would like to do is we would put something like this, because it's really only a template and you flick around, but we would put this up on the dressing room walls before training. And so the girls would have a look at what we're going to do tonight. So get a good read of it, understand what it is, know when we're going out in the field, what we're going to go at, and what's the purpose of training. And it's something, I suppose, that's a big pet hate of mine, where the coach rocks up onto the field at 6:55 for a 7 o'clock session, throws out the balls, throws out a few cones, and we might go and we might do a hand passing drill. And the next thing we'll do is a kick passing drill. And then we'll do you know what, lads, we'll go in and we'll do a bit of tackling. And now we'll play a game. And like everyone that's on this has been there, done that. But really, why? I would question, why are we doing it? What's the purpose of? And I'm probably an absolute pain in the arse for, excuse my French, for a lot of coaches in the last couple of years, because it frustrates me and I question it. I want to question things all the time. If I'm doing something, I want to know why we're doing it. And I'll tell you, the modern player is that, and I'm not a modern player, but like modern intercounty players will eat you alive if you go into them without a plan or an understanding of what they're doing, because they're being exposed to a higher level of coaching. And you can see, like, Colin Collins is brought in, and I bounce a lot of stuff off a good friend of mine, Enda Coughlin, who's selected with Colin Collins. And like, no more than when Mick was in Clare, the lads came back to Kilmurray with a lot of the stuff that Mick Bohan brought. And the same thing when different coaches have been in there, players are bringing stuff out of these sessions and going back to their clubs and challenging the club managers and the club coaches to say, to get better. And for me, looking at this, and we'll go through this, this is kind of the main part of my presentation. So we'll do our warm up. And what we're going to work on is kicking tonight in third man runs, runners off the shoulder, penetrating defences, but with good kicking. So without further ado, we'll pop into what the first part of this might look like. So the drill that I showed you earlier is pretty similar to this. And even though it looks completely different, we're doing the same things. We're popping the ball to someone. We want runners off the shoulder, collect the ball again. But here what we have is we're working on our dominant foot and our weaker foot. So we'll have a 40 by 40, 4 squares, 3 squares, whatever numbers we have, it doesn't matter. We'll just mix and match. Whatever square we're in with the dominant foot, we'll match it up fairly close. We'll put a 4-on-4 or 5v5 or 5v4, because on your dominant foot, your kicking should be better and it must be more accurate. On our weaker foot, to practice our weaker foot, we'll give ourselves more time and space in the square. So we'll lower the numbers and we'll play a 4v2 or a 5v2 or a 5v3, which means we should, and we'll put little, I suppose, rules into the game. So we might put a rule of 1 hand pass, so to set up the play, or it must be a kick fast followed by a hand pass, so they understand what they have to move into space. But all these things, we're playing 3-3-minute games. We're coming back out. How do you find that? What can we do better? Rotate around the squares, dominant foot, non-dominant foot. And we've 9 minutes there, and it's in a game scenario. So that would be the first part of our session, a kick and overload game. So then we might try and add in our third man runs into it then. So what you see here is, if you look at my mouse here, so we'll put a line of cones across here and across here, and we'll say that one player must be in here at all times. And what we'll try and do, it'll just be the kick must go from here, cross over the river as we call it, and it must be a 30-40 yard kick all the time between zones. And these people in the middle are the runners off the shoulder looking to give an option. And we just keep rotating. It's up to themselves. I just want someone in the middle all the time. So if you kick it, you might, and someone runs off the shoulder, someone has to say, oh, well, I need to get back in here. Someone needs to fill the middle. This kind of thing. And you're putting all concepts into their heads. And look, they'll get around the first time and the second time and the third time, and there'll be no one in the middle, and they won't kick the ball over it, and there'll be no runners off the shoulder. But that's fine. That's no problem whatsoever, because we will get there and we will get it right, and they'll start understanding the concept of what we're looking for. But we'll keep it to maybe one play. We might play the way we're facing, different concepts we can put in, but there's no right or wrong here. It's just about getting our kicks in, getting our runners, and practicing decision making. When do we kick the ball? Do we kick it? How do our movement from our forwards or defenders, timing of the run off the shoulder to make sure we don't overrun the player. So that's just our next kind of progression game. And again, we'll run that for 5 minutes, and then we might play 3 games of 5 minutes or 4 minutes, depending on the numbers we have. So we'll take it then into a bigger pitch, and we'll try and do something. We'll overload the middle zone, because we want to get used to kicking long. And the only reason we'll put the kicking into the middle zone is, look, we're looking to get 40, 50 yard kicks. So we'll create a kicking zone in the middle of the pitch, maybe between the 2 45s. We got to work it into these zones, and it must be kick only from them zones. So what we're hoping to do here is we're looking to get the ball out wide, kick diagonal. The people in the middle, we might put something in that only runners off the shoulder can take a score. It doesn't matter really, but what we're looking to see is that these people in here are getting their head up, looking. First option when it gets to midfield is always to look, is the kick on? And then if the kick isn't on, that's when we can go over and back the field. But if the kick is on, you give the kick, because the kick will do damage that the hand pass or the run can't do. A kick will go further than a hand pass or a run all day, every day, and faster. So if our players are out in front, if they're making good movement, we'll pop long balls in here. If we pop it from here in, we're looking for these people over here to be options off the shoulders, and we'll reward good kicking. Again, we can look at putting in different rules into it to suit what we have. But as it goes along, we play it once, we'll question it. We could flick it around and go 5v5 in there, create a bit more space if we find it's too crowded. Again, there's no right, no wrong, but we're playing a game. We're into a full-size pitch now. We've enough practice got, and we're just looking to replicate what we've done in the previous 2. And to finish it off, then we'll play a full game for a couple of minutes. It could be 7 minutes aside. And what we're trying to do is, there's no rules in here, but what we're going to do is we will reward good kicks. So if we get a score, but if a score can be got by just someone executing a 40-yard pass to the outside of the player, we will reward where we get line breaks from third man runners off a kick, and we might deduct points for kicking the ball away or for not getting your head up in time if there was a player free. And we'll just try and, again, reiterate the concept of what we started the session with was we're improving our kicking, and we're also looking at runners off the shoulder. So that kind of is your idea of how I would do a session on, I take a team of a session. And again, this is the only reason I would be doing this is that if I felt our kicking was poor. If I felt that we were kicking the ball well and we were scoring, and we were leaking goals at the back. My session could be all about defending space, tackling, that kind of thing. But this is just a team of what we were looking at tonight. So the last part of this is, for me, I suppose, it was a huge eye-opener for us this year with the Kilmurray Intermediate Ladies, because they were a team that hadn't played in 2 years. We had no team. And it was, the team was reformed, and myself and Inda took them, and John, and we said, look, we've nothing to lose here. If we never won anything or won a game, it was a great breeding ground for us to try and implement some of the stuff that we always would talk about, but you'd never get a chance to do with a senior men's team, because like I went into training half the night with my phone with me and looking at stuff I'd done out on the phone and things. You wouldn't get away with that at senior men's football, because they'd say, where's he going with the phone, or what's he doing? But we'd free rein to do this with the girls. And I'll show you a clip at the end of how this kind of visual learning and getting them to think about the game, but not just being dictating down to them, show them what's visually on a board or on we did a lot of video clips. And then after that, this is what we're trying to achieve here. So you have a picture of it in your head that when we go out, we can try it. But the other thing we also encourage was innovate. I would never give out to anybody for making a mistake trying to do the right thing. You shoot for the corner flag, I'm going to give out to you. But if you kick the ball away trying to execute a diagonal crossfield ball, or if you try and loop a long hand pass over the top with a goal on, fine by me, because if you don't take a chance, you can't win. So what we would have done with the girls is kind of said, when you're in these particular zones of the pitches, of the pitch, this is what your options are. So if you're in the wide channels, and what we're looking for is to recycle it back in field, come around on the loop. So start out wide, make cut runs into the middle. You see the Dublin lads doing it all the time, starting at hugging the touchline, ball runner comes through the middle, they cut in off the sideline, bang through the middle again. If you're up higher up the pitch in the red zones here, like you see Con O'Callaghan, the Dublin lads, they keep going back to Dublin because obviously they're the best at a lot of stuff. But the backdoor cuts, and we're going to see some of these, the loops and around for a score. When you're in this zone, you have a couple of things that you want to do. You also, if you're a full forward, we want you getting your head up, looking for runners off the shoulder. But if you're out here and you might have seen Kieran Kilkenny played a lot of his time, is you're over here, you're shifting the play, you're dictating the play, you're getting on the ball, you're switching the channels. But you'll see from the clips that I have coming up, this channel here and this channel here, both sides of the D around the 45 area is where a lot of damage is done from penetrating runs. You get feck all running down these sidelines, you get nothing here. If you can shift the ball to runners coming through these channels in this purple area, that's where a lot of scores are got. And we would have done a lot of this, and then a good friend of mine, Andy Moran, came and did a few bits with us, but being able to visualize what we wanted to do. And like you take trying to teach a female intermediate team who hadn't played in 2 years backdoor cuts, like that was alien to people. They said, what are you trying to do? But like, I'll show you how the conclusion of that as we go through it. But so to start here with Andy, what I'm going to show you here is, and I'm going to try and pause as we go along, we go back here, but it's what we have here. If you watch Andy Moran in here, watch his jinx, cuts, and he's back in. So what you're looking at over in this clip here is you're looking at a couple of different things going on. You're looking at, first of all, as it goes along, Andy makes a run down here and the space is here. The guy is coming through that zone we talked about, the purple zone. And what happens then is his arm is up. His arm is up. He's pointing to the player. But the big thing is Andy can have his arm up all day long. If this guy here doesn't lift his head and look at what's the best option for him, he never sees the cut. Do you know, more, I would say 50-60% of lads, what will they do? Andy makes his first run out here. This guy, look, kick it in here. Your man is caught. Andy's caught behind his man here. Your man goes up the field and they say, Jesus, he's lazy. But he's just thinking ahead. So we roll it on, hand in. Your man carries. Full back is taken to the cleaners and we've a goal. So again, Andy's role is the red. So from our pitch, again, we're looking, he has 3. What did he do out of that? He cut. So he showed and he cut. And in our purple zone, we carried hard through the middle. This guy here, I think, I can't remember his name, but he did a lot of carrying that day. But we move on again to a similar clip. Again, you watch here, all the space is here, and we play. So if we play this, Tom O'Sullivan gets on the ball here. So here, in here, I think this is Shawnee O'Shea. Shawnee makes his run out here. Tom O'Sullivan carries, gets his head up, sees the dink. Shawnee cuts it back in here, and he's all this space created from himself, and he's in. Again, another example of our purple zone where Tom O'Sullivan drove hard onto the left of the D, and we used the cut again in here. So we would have used some of these video clips to get that point home of how you cut. So the big thing, I suppose, on that cut, them two runs, that, and I would have picked Andy Moran's brains on this, is that the big part of that is the forward has to show hard. You have to show like you want the ball, or else the defender won't be attracted. So if you saunter out there and want to cut, it's not going to work. You have to get it that the defender is up your arse so much that when you do spin, that he hasn't time to react. This is some attacking play from Tyrone. Now, it's a kind of a diagonal kick, but they get a couple of different concepts in two scores here, which I found was really interesting. So here, long ball into space, which we like to kick from the middle area. And what you see here is interesting. This guy here, when he sees the ball go to this player here, he doesn't decide to run this line. He's already starting to angle his run in, and you'll see it's something that Tyrone do a lot. You'll see another runner coming, so from the outside in with their cut runs. So he popped, an angle runner coming in, pop, and it's a handy score from around the D. So again, we use the long kick pass, and our two sides from the wings, we have hard runners coming. So this is another one then. The difference being here, if we watched Andy and we watched Shawnee O'Shea, what they would have done is come hard and spin in behind. Because the space is too tight here, this is another thing what you can do. You come on the loop. So comes on the loop, attracts two defenders, and kicks a handy score. So for me, in them, again, we go back here to our red zone again. If we're in the red zone as a full forward, what do we want to do? We want to either score, we look for runners coming off our shoulder, we can make a cut, or we can come and loop like you've seen there. If we're in the middle or centre forward position, we want to pass and move there, not stay and block up the whole area. We want to clear the D. Third man runs from your centre forward or your half forward and carry the ball hard at the defence. And then from the outside, we want to recycle the ball back from the sidelines inwards. We want to look at diagonal kicking, and we want to come on the loop. So these are high quality inter-county teams. You might say, look, it's all well and good, but look, you don't have these at club level. But this is what I wanted to show you here is what we have here is a clip from the Kilmurray girls intermediate final. And this is why I feel I was really a believer in games-based coaching after this, because we would have took this. And if you watch this clip here, so kicking the ball here, on the ball below here, we have a 15-year-old girl. So what we also have then is we have our corner forward vacating the space. Everyone is clearing out the D that we would have called it empty the D. And we have our target person here. So the kick was always going in here, and we roll it through. Ball comes, this girl knows straight away, the minute the ball goes over her shoulder, ball goes into the full forward, she's gone already. The cornerback has got attracted to the ball, third man run, loop off the shoulder, and the ball is in the back of the net. Now, that to me was, when I seen that, win, lose or draw the game, it didn't really matter. But when you see stuff like that coming off, that we would have used video clips to show them inter-county players doing, and like to see a 15-year-old execute a kick, a 40-yard kick with the outside of her right boot, that came from game-based coaching, because we would have worked a lot on this stuff throughout the year. And from after that, it really hit home to me. I said, if they can do it, if a 15-year-old girl can get the concept of what inter-county players are doing, then anybody can learn from game-based coaching. And ever since then, I suppose I've read more documents about the pediology of it and all this kind of stuff. But it was quite interesting that if you looked at the 3 or 4 clips of inter-county football to intermediate ladies football at club level, the score wouldn't have come out of hand. They wouldn't have looked out of place if the Kerry boys or the Dublin boys did it. So we're nearly there. For me, a recap is one thing I think we're done, and it's something Paul Kinnerk once said, is we're bound by tradition in the GAA. We coach the same as we have been coached. And that's something I personally, right or wrong, I would like to get away from. What might have worked 20 years ago isn't going to work on today's players because they just engage differently. They're a different breed, and you have to find different ways to engage them. So for me, recapping, I would always question everything. When we meet up at the start of the year as a management team, question ourselves, what do we want to be? What kind of management team do we want to be? What are we going to do? I would then plan for what's ahead, execute it. So say what we're going to do for the year and carry it out. Don't go half-arsed at it and halfway through say, oh Jesus, it's not working, we lost 2 games, let's change it all up. Reflect at the end of a league, or reflect at the end of a couple of matches, how is it going for you? Adjust it if you need to. Innovate, watch other sports, rugby, basketball, soccer, see can you pull other stuff out of that, and embrace the players. If you have ones that don't stop talking, if you have ones that love the beer, if you embrace it and just work with it. Don't try and pigeonhole people into places that they're not meant to be. To be a good manager, I think you need to bring everyone together and find what makes people tick. So that would be the takeaways for me on it. And to leave it with, I don't know, I don't really like Arsenal, but Dennis Bergkamp made a good quote. He said, there are times not to coach. The urge is to step in and show them. Sometimes it's better to let them make a mistake. Sometimes they learn more from the mistake than being told what to do. And particularly in ladies football, I 100% think that's a really good analogy and a quote from Dennis. So finally, I suppose I love talking about GA. If any of you want to get in contact with me, my Twitter handle, I leave it up here while the Q&A is on. DM, get on to me, follow me, talk about football. We haven't much else to be doing. So over to you, Sean. I know I ran on a bit, and I leave it at that.
Excellent, Evan. No, all very good stuff, and thanks a million. You know, your delivery was perfect. You know, a lot of good stuff there. I was a bit disappointed to see my home club, Milton Melby, in that video clip. I told you to take that one out. But, you know. Anyway, thanks, Evan. Okay, maybe hand over to Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, and Sarah, are there any questions there? Any common themes coming up for Evan?
She's on mute.
Anne-Marie, your mic, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just the first question that has come in, Evan. What age group would you implement this approach with?
All age groups, Anne-Marie. So from under 8 all the way up, you might need to do a bit of, I feel anyway, you can do a bit of skills work with them, maybe a little more drill side of stuff to get their skills up to speed, but it's definitely no harm to keep them playing games.
Perfect. And I know that you mentioned earlier about you used a kick and drill there, and that would be a linear approach in terms that it shows you how to execute a skill, and it doesn't really teach the when, the where, the why. And do you feel that the games-based approach helps in teaching the where, the when, and the why?
100%. That's what games-based is about, really. It's about, and it all boils down to one thing, Anne-Marie, it's decision making. And when you're in a game, you have to make decisions all the time. And in drills, you don't have to make decisions. And it's the same if you're a teacher and you're teaching languages at school and you're inside in a classroom and you can't learn French or you can't learn Irish, and you go to Gaeltacht and you're just thrown into the middle of a place to speak Irish for 3 weeks. Lo and behold, you come out of there with way more Irish than you spent 5 years inside in school doing. It's the exact same thing, the exact same approach between drills and game-based.
Okay, we'll move on then. So,
and just in terms of learning from top teams.
No, go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Just in terms of learning from top teams. Just in terms of learning from top teams, would you agree that there are skills and tips and hints that you can pick from their play that will help you regardless of the squad that you coach?
Oh, definitely. I've clips from intercounty men, basketball, ladies football, everything. And I said this to Mick today, I suppose the thing for me is like Mick Bohan could give me every training session he'd done with the Dublin ladies last year, and really and truly it's of no benefit to me. I might pick a few bits and pieces, but he's dealing with a squad that he knows, and everything he is doing is for the Dublin lady footballers and that particular setup. And for me, there's no point trying to coach the standard or the players that I have with what the Dublin ladies have. I have to coach and adapt to how you have in front of me.
Perfect. And another question that has come in there, where did you get the training plan layout? Like, are the pictures and the graphics available to get online?
Yeah, if anyone wants to add me on Twitter or something like that, I'll email them the templates.
Perfect. And where is the best place to get the games-based approach material? Is it online?
Yeah, it is. Like, but it again, I would just be wary of being what I would call a copy and paste merchant, because there's no point going in and taking a heap of drills online for your team if they're not adaptable. So try and innovate. Understand what game. I would say look up more than just looking up drills. Understand what games based mean and what you should do with it, and from there then try your own drills even.
Perfect. Okay. And just another one. When did you decide it was time to stop and change the drill rather than continue pushing through the mistakes, when it was newly introduced? So obviously this would be very important to coaches that are just kind of taking over a team and getting to know your team. When did you realize it was time to stop and change?
So I would say with that, it's there isn't, like, mistakes will happen at all the time. So for me, it was just something that I decided when I would go coaching that I'd have kept a lot of voice notes and screenshots and all this kind of thing, that when I did go coaching, I wanted to go down the games-based route. So and just stick by it.
Okay, and Marie, we'll leave it there for the moment, and we'll pick up on some of the other ones then maybe at the end. Okay. We'll move on. Thanks for that, Marie. Thanks, Evan. We'll move on then. Our next speaker is a woman who needs absolutely I see her playing in the background there. She needs no introduction whatsoever. She's had a great success as a player. She's the holder of 10 All-Ireland medals. She's a 6-time All-Star. She's still playing, as I understand, for club, but she has seamlessly moved into coaching as well, and she's a huge contribution to make. Valerie has also played soccer and basketball at a high level, and she may have some tips there around, how to deal with girls playing multiple codes. She'll also touch on player-led models, inclusiveness, accountability, and maybe speak about how ladies football is a late specialisation sport. So Valerie, over to you, and thanks a million.
Hi, thanks very much. Can you see me here? All okay? So Evan, thanks very much. I'm actually laughing at your handle there on Twitter, Evan Almighty. I'll definitely be coming to you for a few resources. So thanks for having me, and I hope I can impart a small bit of my knowledge. When I was asked to come on, it was to do with coaching and the transition from playing to coaching, and in a way I'm kind of cheating because I'm still doing both. So that's my transition secret. Keep up both if you can, and have one foot in both camps. But so what happened to me as well, like I would have coached. I'm obviously a teacher, so you're required nearly as a PE teacher to do take on some teams. So in school I take a team. Now we wouldn't have a huge history of sport in the girls section of the school, so we we're starting from a kind of a low base there, but there have been clubs formed since, so that's great. And a lot of it is about bringing enthusiasm and a good environment to the coaching. So my coaching started there. Obviously I was doing summer camps, GA camps, and then I got involved with the Cork Minors with John Cleary for 2 years. And then when I was in Dublin last year, I took a year out, and this lady, kind of Deborah Heavey, actually, she was on 6-1 News there recently, but with Marty, she's a good laugh. But she was enticed me into the local club Ballyboden, and I was unsure. And she was like, "Look, they really need a manager. They have good players and all that, but there hasn't been the enthusiasm or appetite in a while." And I think that the women have been kind of, put to the side or second-class citizens for a while. So I was like, "Geez, this would be a good challenge." So I got involved, and then I got a good management team around me, which I think is essential, especially as someone like me who's probably new enough to it all, and knew that I had a certain amount of skill set, and drew on others with different skill sets and people with the same values as me and who aligned to my thinking and my values. So I thought that was crucial, and also some people who were a bit like I'd respect, and that we could debate issues and not all just be yes people. So anyway, I decided to take on the job, and lo and behold, I was kind of joining in, as I tend to do, and I did with the minor training as well. I find that it's easier sometimes to influence things, or to showcase, say, movements or plays or forward thinking and space creating and all that. So I got involved a bit, and then they were kind of asking me would I play. And anyway, COVID happened, the whole lot, a few injuries, and lo and behold, I was actually back playing and thought I could contribute somewhat. So that got me playing, and I was enjoying it. And I was allowed to play because I had a good management on the sideline that I could trust to make the decisions when it came to match day. So it's been going well, and I've decided to continue onto my second year because I wanted to kind of have building blocks. But the transition to play, from player to management, I would say there's a great insight to be got from, when you're just fresh out of playing, you kind of are familiar with the players' thought processes, with what they want. You're up to date with kind of, what's the evidence and the knowledge base, and, forward thinking, and you still can be very empathetic towards the player, while it's also going into the coaching aspect. And I think, obviously I've been very fortunate to be involved with Eamon Ryan over 10 years. And I actually have a lovely card here. Can you see my picture? So it says, a good coach can change the game. A great coach can change a life. And I think that was Eamon. I think, in his passing, I think none of us really spoke about the All-Irelands we'd won, but it was more about his impact on us as people and players. So, I think that's important. So, obviously I had that. I could draw on a lot of experience that Eamon, a lot of learning that Eamon provided us with. But I also had played a lot of sports. So I played soccer underage, got a cap, played with there's the World Games, so we were trained 3 times a day and stuff. So I could use a lot of different concepts in that and bring them to the football. Plus, I'm a PE teacher, so I would have done a lot of things like, and Evan might be familiar with this, and Mick would definitely with PE teaching, the sports education model. So it's a bit like a players-led model in that with sports education, you're encouraging the class and the group to kind of take on different roles. So they're not all just playing. There's like a referee, there's a coach, there's different things. So it's allowing kind of players or people to flourish in the sporting environment while not necessarily having to be a player. So that's just kind of an idea of like encouraging people. But look, the player-led model is really about ensuring that the player is central to everything. I mean, you're kind of fooling yourself if you think it's all about you. And as a coach, I think it's much better and it's more rewarding anyway if you can get the best out of your players by having it player-led and player-centered and working around the players and kind of embracing what they want. Now, obviously, they not dictate things, but you're trying to create an environment that facilitates learning and allows them to express themselves and allow them to flourish rather than to kind of confine them with different tactics and that. So like what we did with Cork was we really worked on the skill set, and I know Mick is going to speak about that a lot, but it's you can keep it quite basic, develop your different independent thinkers and all that through decision making and allowing players express themselves and play what's in front of them and not being like dictated by these different I suppose plans or kind of tactics. Okay, so I have it more concept based, but definitely a player-led model is very important. And I think like you can really impact a player by your presence and your approach and your positivity and that. And I think, I'm going to probably refer to Eamon quite a lot here, but I think, he was very empathetic. He was understood that when we went out to play, we went out to do our best. We made a mistake. That's okay. It's going to happen. It's how you recover, how you react. He never gave out to anyone for trying. In terms, he had massive knowledge. So I think it's very important to try and keep, developing your knowledge. And it's like teaching. They say when, if you think you've learned it all, if you know it all, that's time to retire because you don't. You're never going to know everything. So I think it's important to kind of keep up to date with things, you know, go to different training sessions, go to county games early, have a look at different coaches, how they operate, pick up little nuggets of information from others, have chats, have conversations, create a little WhatsApp going, you know, get go to as many education workshops as you can, whilst keeping in mind every coach is unique, and that's what makes them great sometimes, is their uniqueness. So you have to kind of embrace that as well. And I think there's no point in trying to replicate someone else, but I think it is good to take little pieces from others, but also to stamp your own kind of identity on things. So that's what I'd be saying there. Like, definitely player led. You know, it is about the players essentially. You gotta develop a good relationship with them as well, and make them want to play, want to do well for you. You know, and that takes time to get to know them, what their interests are, how you can help them off the pitch as much as on the pitch. Also knowing their motivations, knowing what makes them tick, and like that's one of probably the big things. Understanding their why they're there. You know, what is it that is driving them there? Is it their competitiveness out and out? Is it their social interaction? Is it to be fit? Is it they just love football? Just try and understand the why. And if you understand the why, and if the why is big enough, you'll be able to figure out, and you as a group will be able to figure out the how you're going to achieve what you want to achieve. But I think that's enough really said on the player-led model. It's just really ensuring that you look after your players, look out for them. And I think as well, it was mentioned earlier, just to reiterate that point that was made earlier about, you know, embracing players. Every player is different, you know, we've different characters, we've different personalities, and everyone can bring something important to the table. And it's about ensuring that you know what's their strengths are, getting the best out of them, and also you know, giving them different roles and ensuring that they feel like they belong and that they're valued. You know, some of your most important players might be the players who are on the bench supporting others, and you know, that sub goalie who's pushing that goalie to keep their number one spot. So
just on that, would you say that Eamon's biggest and I didn't know him at all, but his biggest trait was to be able to win 10 in a row, to be able to keep refreshing the squad. So it wasn't all about drills or anything like that. It was about, I suppose, keeping the players fresh and hungry to come back year after year after year and keep the standards high.
But first of all, I think Mick would be too happy because we didn't win 10 in a row. The Dubs there, we took a break and the Dubs won 2010. But yeah, I think like Eamon was very an empathetic person and very much holistic and that, and didn't want to upset players. He never dropped a player from the panel, but he did. There was a few years there we only had one or two new people in, but like we also were a very competitive group, and we're very hardworking and kind of pushed each other. And as I'm going to come on to the whole accountability element, you know, it was kind of like we took ownership, and there was a lot of all of us were in it together. You know, it wasn't management against players. Did he freshen it up? Yeah, but I think essentially, you know, the younger players did have to wait their time. Like they didn't get just brought on, and he had a great loyalty for, you know, for us, the older players, I guess, the core group. There was that kind of sense of loyalty towards us, and you had to bide your time and take your chance then when it came. So, yeah, I mean, he kept it fresh. But in saying that, like, we often did the same drills, the same types of hand passing games and all that, like from day one. Like, it was very much sticking to the basics, skill orientated, and he's, you know, had us setting targets. And like, I think with the group we had, we would probably won an All-Ireland or two, but like, it was definitely Eamon and his psychology and motivation and storytelling and ability to capture us, that and that unity and bond that we all formed, that and he facilitated all that for sure, and broke down barriers with clubs when things weren't going well in the early days. So, I mean, he's hugely to thank for all that. I hope that answers that question. In terms of accountability, like, it's crucial that it comes from the group, and I think culture is a massive word, and what do we mean by culture? I think it's an environment you create. I think it's the standards you set. I think it's players feeling valued and be able to say, giving feedback, being critical, and that has to be twofold, and it has to be two-way. It has to be management being able to take some criticism, holding their hand up when things maybe didn't go well. And I remember being at a conference years ago, and someone asked, "Oh, are you on a drinking ban?" And I said, "Jesus, no, there's never like any of that kind of stuff mentioned." But it was very much self-regulated, and I think that was the word that I took away from that. Some guy said, "Oh, you're self-regulated," and I said, "Yeah, I think that probably summarizes us in that we took account ourselves, and I remember one year there was one girl apparently at Galway races, and she, like, we weren't a bit happy, so we kind of pulled her up on it, and it was kind of done, but without management having to have an impact there, because we just knew what it took. And I suppose from winning every year, we kind of knew we had to do a bit more, and we didn't want to let the standards drop. So there was definitely a big sense of accountability. More recently, with all this COVID, things like Strava are very helpful, creating a little club group. Players do their runs, and you can attach your Garmin or sync it up to a Garmin, Fitbit, whatever, or your phone, Strava even. And that helps people to be more accountable, and it also helps players to see each other doing their work and encourage each other. I think obviously important to take attendance, being careful with, I understand the whole club situation, and sometimes players might swan in and think they can play, but I think it's important that you stick to your guns. Like, if you have to have players at training, and what's good is setting targets, having them, motivated by targets, and also making achievable goals and targets so that you do feel success. And as was mentioned earlier, Evan said, like, I mean, if you're going to define your season by winning the county or the championship, that's only going to happen one team. And I think it was last year or last season probably allowed a lot of us to appreciate, what football is for all of us, and what benefits we can get from it, and that, being able to play that championship last year even was success in itself, So definitely be careful with what you define success as, like, the whole thing is fun and enjoyment, right? So I mean, it's got to be about that. That's the why. That's why the young girl was out playing, and when they were younger, and that shouldn't change. And I think it's very important as a coach to be positive. And actually, one thing I wanted to say was, that allowing players to express themselves, and definitely Eamon allowed us to do that. We played with freedom. It was like the shackles were off, and we had the training done, and there was no real tactics at all whatsoever. But it was like you play what you see, and there was no plan B, because we didn't know what we were going to do ourselves. So if we didn't know, the opposition certainly didn't know. But I have played with players, or been on the sideline with management, who are shouting and roaring and dictating every move, or trying to tell their player to do everything. And it infuriates me. But it's like you have to hand over that ownership to the players that are playing. And as well, that can be stressing if you're a management side, and you're feeding that into the players. It becomes a bit more stressful. So you have to step back and allow them to kind of take the ownership and trust in them. When they cross that line, they're in control. So that's probably something big. And I like that bird camp thing, allowing them to maybe see their or experience the kind of mistakes themselves, so they can learn probably a lot quicker. Just in terms of late specialization, so what is late specialization? There's certain sports that are required early specialization, where you need to be there early in order to develop the skills. Maybe camogie, be something like that. It's very hard to take that up at the age of 15, 16. So with football, like, I mean, an example would be Angela Walsh. Didn't play underage with Cork at all. I think she started playing camogie ladies football late enough, made the minor Cork team, and by 18, 19 she was on the Cork senior team. But that was also because she was off running as well. So that it was a different skill set in herself, and obviously endurance and that. I played basketball. Juliet would have played basketball at international level. I didn't. Juliet did. Nolig would have played at a high level. A lot of players probably played a different sport as well. or would have played a lot with the lads when we were younger, because we didn't have the opportunity to play on an all-girls team because the facilities or the clubs weren't there. So I think, you know, to see, like, okay, maybe you mightn't want to encourage players playing many sports, but I think it's important to facilitate it at the least, and understand that, like, the later they pick, it's probably the better. I've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence to support the fact that players, if they're choosing like golf and single sports too early, they can just burn out or just feel apathetic towards it in later years. So I think it's important to give them an opportunity to play many different sports. 2 seconds, I'm just going to get them. The other thing is it allows, by having different sports, and I think we might talk about later, the dummy, like, you develop a repertoire of kind of skills and a bank of memories and skills that you can draw on when you're playing a sport. So, like, I would have used a lot of basketball moves that I had, or obviously I would have, I was small, like, and I'm kind of growing it now, but I was a point guard, but I was able to, I had good peripheral vision, good understanding of play and seeing the opposition and trying to counteract what their defense was. So if it was man-to-man or zonal defense, I was, you know, reading that kind of situation, playing back doors. Like, there was one match, Mick, if I remember this, 2014, Rona came on and I saw an opportunity. I had the ball and I was kind of holding it up, and I saw Rona and I gave her the little nod to try and get her to go back door. So I laid the ball after her. She went back door and finished it superbly. So, like, that kind of skill came from basketball and playing as point guard and seeing plays and trying to get people moving and laying the ball off. So it can be very beneficial. And, like, if you look at the likes, I know now this is probably a rare breed, but like Breach and Rena, the ability of those two women to do what they did at football and camogie, like, and they obviously they both, the sports helped each other. So I think if you can at all facilitate and hopefully encourage your players to, you know, to play many sports and many activities, and I think that's very important. So obviously inclusivity, I think, is a massive thing, and it's something very close to my heart. I think, you know, as a coach, it's very important to be encouraging and create an environment where people feel like they can be themselves and belong. And I think it's very important to embrace and celebrate our differences, and, you know, remember that they're coming to your club training or your county training to have fun, and it might be escape for some of them, or it might be the one time where they're out of their head and they're not overthinking what they're, you know, their thought processes. And I think if you have a happier players, they tend to be better players, and they tend to play better. I just think it's important that you just be careful in your wording and your messages, and understand that you know, GA can be a place for everyone. I think it's important to kind of reiterate that and make people feel very comfortable. Obviously, with the whole you know, sexuality thing, don't be presuming anything, and just be open to allowing people be themselves. I think that's probably my key message. You know, I was involved with many teams, and no one treated me any differently, and I don't think you know, anyone has been hostile or I think the GA is a lovely community, and I think for the most part is very, very warm and encouraging for people to be themselves. So you know, try and create that community and that family environment, and embrace people's differences. Sure, that's what makes the world an interesting place. What I want to speak about next is there anything else I want to touch on? I think, like, central to everything, right? There's a lot to be gained from coaching. You know, it transpires, and the greatest benefit is when you see others doing great stuff, you know, and how you can maybe mold or help shape a player, or even go beyond that and help shape their life. And your impact is monumental and can be massive. So be positive, be encouraging, you know, be careful in your criticism, definitely constructive in your criticism. But no players are always you know that players are always trying to do their best, and if you can, you know, create a good environment, a fun, enjoyable environment, I think that's half the battle, and get players leaving wanting more, you know, in trainings where players want more, and I think the importance of bond is huge. And I think, you know, obviously there's challenges over this time when people can't get together, but you know, be innovative and do a little cook along, or use this opportunity to maybe get a nutritionist in to speak, or you know, draw on the knowledge and the expertise that's around you. There's always people in clubs that have some great skill sets that you can draw on, and you play to your own strengths and let others play to their strengths. So that's my main goal. Try and learn all the time, be creative, try things out, you know, and allow players to make mistakes, be encouraging, have fun, and have a purpose about what you're doing, and enjoy it, like, because that's what it is all about. That's what that's why we all stay involved. Enjoy it, and work hard, and that's it, really.
Excellent, Valerie. Thanks a million, Valerie. That was very interesting, and I'm sure there are many questions for you there. Anne-Marie, is there any particular theme there that you want to ask Valerie on?
Yeah, we have lots of questions coming in. Valerie, you'll be delighted to hear. The first one, you touched on it there slightly with your signature dummies. Obviously, your skill levels were very high when you were playing. Was this natural, or did you practice a lot on an individual basis, or did other sports like the basketball influence this?
I would definitely say that, like, I was probably naturally sporty, and I was kind of tried everything and you know, took it up fairly easily. But I would have played soccer in the yard every lunch break when I was in primary school. I played basketball, so definitely developed. Probably the dummy was probably a bit of basketball with the bounce, or the fake, or the eyes, you know, looking one way, passing another. So yeah, I think the different sports definitely would have helped me develop those skills and draw on them, and maybe adapt them slightly for the football. But I'd say a bit of both, probably a bit of natural talent maybe, but also, yeah, I mean, I practiced a lot. I practiced my kicking a huge amount, and that's where I got my confidence. I kicked off the ground because, yeah, I played a lot of soccer and would have had the, you know, taken a few free kicks and penalties and that, but I definitely would have practiced a lot to ensure that I was confident, and I took the role of free taking seriously, and I saw it as an opportunity, and obviously responsibility, but an opportunity to keep myself on the team, and I loved kicking around. So I mean, it was like, it wasn't a chore for me anyway, for sure. So that would be probably it, a bit of both.
Yeah, and just mentioning another sport here, a question has come in about the AFL. Would you consider going to Australia to play AFL? Like your former teammate Breed Stack, I know.
Jesus, yeah, until I heard Breed Stack.
I know she was unlucky for an injury.
And 2 concussions and a broken hand, and it's a tough sport. I know I do the dummies and stuff, but I don't think any of them would work over there. They just pull you down. So I don't know how suited I would be, but geez, yeah, it would have been a great opportunity. But like that, you know, when things were going well with Cork, no one wanted to leave, and no one ever thought of leaving. And I think it's different in that Breed has left after she retired. So it's like, you know, we can kind of enjoy her being up there because it hasn't left a loss or a deficit in the Cork camp. But geez, yeah, I'd be open to ideas, like, yeah, if I'm getting old though.
Yeah. Valerie,
a few questions comes in, and a few questions have come in terms of training. Was everyone on the Cork panel committed, and was the training fun, or was it your passion that got you through those training sessions?
It was fun. I think was probably generous of it. It was tough. But it was enjoyable. Like, we had just, like, obviously success is enjoyable, and success breeds success, and we had the crack beforehand. Like, we'd meet in a half an hour beforehand. We'd have the chats. We'd kick around. We'd have the crack after. We'd have the soup and sandwiches, or Frank would make soup on a Sunday. We'd hang around for half an hour after. But when we were out there, we were serious. There was no real yapping because you wouldn't have time to catch your breath. It was one activity to one drill to another exercise. But it was rewarding, like, and it was fun in the sense that it was enjoyable, but it was tough. But I think that's what we all wanted anyway, because it was we were competitive, and we wanted, like, we took it quite seriously. So
and just the last question in this theme, what was your most memorable All-Ireland win?
2014.
Okay.
But my first as well, I think, was huge, obviously. And after the match, I played well that way. I got, first, like, kind of fulfilling your dream of youth, like imagining I was playing Croke Park and actually getting to play the match, all the management and all enjoying it together. But the whole crowd were allowed onto the pitch, and that's a massive memory. So we even got a bit panicked because we couldn't find our way back to the stand when the cup was being presented. We kind of drifted from each other. So that's a memory. But yeah, 2014 was amazing, because I think obviously there was a lot of different emotions in the match, and at one stage we thought it was gone, but I think we got to show and reveal our character and what we were all about, and it was memorable because I think it really showcased what we were about, and having, being 10 points down and not giving up, and clawing our way back.
Yeah, that determination that got through.
That determination, and probably having experience. Wanting to, when you're expected to win, it becomes like a relief rather than anything. Whereas we were so far behind in that, it was like we were underdogs again, and having that kind of elation, like, amazing.
Yeah. And just in terms of
Anne-Marie, we might just leave a few questions near to the end again now, because Anne-Marie or Valerie, you certainly weren't underdogs, but I'm just anxious to get Mick. I know, like, we could be here all night, we'd have a week of lectures here, but I'm just conscious there. I don't want to be holding you up for too long. Our final speaker tonight, and we kept him late, or we kept him to the end deliberately as well, so as that we keep our group, and our participants are still holding very, very strong, and we've got a few more since the thing started. Needs no introduction. Valerie mentioned there, Dublin interfered with Cork's plans for, what was it, probably 12 in a row nearly, if Dublin hadn't come along in 2010. But Mick has 4 in a row got now, and is online, no disrespect to Cork. And with Valerie above and Ballyboden and St Hinda's, I'm sure that'll help the Dublin cause as well next year. He needs no introduction. He's living in the big smoke, but he's a Clareman at heart. And tonight he's going to cover the importance of skills development in players, and some leadership tips generally. So Mick, over to you, and thanks a million.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me on tonight. I'd far rather be in my 5 kilometre zone down where you guys are at the moment than where I am at the minute, but that's the way it is. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to Evan and Valerie there, because what people, I suppose, have to realise in all of this is that we're constantly looking to learn, to pick up things, to, small little nuggets of information, just to keep you, moving forward as opposed to standing still. So I had that chat with Evan during the week about, I love having conversations with people who are have a similar mindset, or are stimulated or stimulate you, just to keep things fresh. So I'm learning here as much as anybody else. The caption I put up tonight there is, that's how we do things around here, because a lot of people ask what culture is, or how do you create, or what the setup. And I picked that up off Desi Farrell a number of years back, and I was involved with Nafina, and I always remember that statement that he made, that's how we do things around here. And when I went trying to put standards in place with our group, I just thought it was a lovely synopsis of what is culture. Well, that's how we do things around here. And what does that mean? Like, it's simple things like collecting the cones, or picking up the jerseys rather than having them on the dressing room floor, because that's how we do things around here. And there's a learning in that, because we don't all come with those things. Like, we've to instill it and as a result of that, then people learn. My history, first and foremost, is I'm a PE teacher, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in a lot of teams and learned from an awful lot of good people that I've worked with over the years. I go up and down and around the country giving coach education talks to county boards and clubs, and I get a real enjoyment out of that, because that whole interaction that we're all missing at the moment, and passing on just nuggets of information that I picked up of people over the course of the years. And you just might see there on the last one, Dublin Jackies. I thought it was very interesting. I picked up off the girls in Australia that they have names for all of the teams, the girls team. So they're not known as the Australian ladies, whatever, Melbourne team. And it's something that resonated with me, because we took over the group in 2017, and just to a short story before that, I'm a PE teacher, and like Valerie, I tried to, over the years, to do a lot of, if I took a lads Gaelic team, I might take a girls soccer team, or if I took a girls Gaelic team, I might take a lads basketball team, just to try and be fair to kids in the school. And so I was involved with the girls back in 2002, and Dublin won their first Leinster title, senior title, back in 2002. I was there for 2 years, and in 2003 we were beaten in the All-Ireland final by Mayo. And I'd say I've seen it, or it's been said to me 1,000 times, that my first stint was the Dublin ladies was unsuccessful. And I look and think, how was it unsuccessful? What was success measured by? We took a team from intermediate level, essentially, to win their first Leinster title, and we're beaten in an All-Ireland final by a team who were better than us. And that's the interesting thing in coaching, in that you have to know what you have. I mean, I certainly look back on that time, and maybe we could have snuck an All-Ireland against Mayo, but they were the better team. And I'm able to live with that down through the years. So the measure of success isn't always in cups or medals. And when we took over this group back in 2017, we made that very clear to them, in spite of the fact, obviously, that they were after succumbing to 3 All-Ireland defeats. And I'll come back to that. Success and what it looks like. On the right-hand side is, for anyone who's involved in coaching or management, that will resonate, because that's exactly what it is. It's an absolute muddle, and there are so many problems during the course of the year that you're trying to iron out. And when we go and see the teams on the penultimate stage or the biggest day, we tend to see things, that seem to be flawless, or that are working particularly well. But for 99% of that season, the right-hand side, the box on the right-hand side, is exactly what those coaches and management teams dealt with. When you're coaching, guys, and I saw some of the questions going up in the chat as regards, dealing with different kids and age groups, and when do you introduce different things, or sanctions for arriving late? And the answer is, there is no one rule for all. There just is no one rule for all. And one of the things that I've come to, and I'd be, you got to bear in mind that, and going back to Evan's point, no matter what we say about trying to be different than what came before us, sometimes there's no point in being different just for the sake of being bit different, because there's a lot of good stuff that we did in the past. There's nothing wrong with a bit of hardship every now and again in training. That's not a mortal sin. But equally, there are things you do learn. Like, some people have no issue in the world about being pulled up in front of a group. Some people take huge exception to being pulled up in front of a group. If you raise your voice at some people, they get upset. If you raise it at others, they take the approach, well, I'll show him or I'll show her. So no one size fits all. And on a funny note on that, there's a girl involved with us as a selector, Elaine Kelly is her name, and she's a psychologist by day. And I remember after about 10 or 11 weeks, we were involved with the girls, and I asked her how things were going, and she said to me, they're going great, Mick. You spend about 12 hours a week breaking them, and I spend about 20 hours a week fixing them. And that sums it up, because ultimately it takes everything. It takes the components of the wheel to make everything work. The slide that in front of you there, that's a brilliant team talk, guys. I haven't a clue what they're saying, but they have taken control. And that is success, all right? So praise the young, because ultimately, what have they done? They've taken ownership of the thing. They could be talking about how long the second half is, but they are taking ownership of it. And that's the whole thing in sport, allowing people time to breathe and make mistakes and have learnings and then move on. And ultimately, I suppose, in the week that was in it with the LGFA and things that happened off the field, the lessons that we're trying to pass on to our kids and our players is that you go out, you play the game, you make mistakes, you learn from mistakes, and you move on. And that's the game continuously, and that'll never change. And the same thing goes with training. And I saw another, Sean was alluding to the numbers of All Irelands, and it's even scary to hear the success that Cork had. I wish they didn't have it, because it nearly puts a barrier up in front that, you know, when you win one, then you're expected to win two. And when you win two, then you're expected to chase the Cork record. And it's almost impossible to replicate. And, you know, what they achieved was just phenomenal, and fair play to them. And to be honest with you, you know, I don't think anybody particularly wants to see that success replicated by any one team. They want to see it shared around. So, but going back to the lads, when we would have started off with them, never once do we talk about winning a cup or winning a title, winning a league, winning an All-Ireland. That was not part of the discussion. It was about achieving the highest possible skill set that they possibly could, and playing the game at the highest possible level that they possibly could. And way back in 2010, when we started with the under-21s, we identified Kerry as being the most dominant team in the game as regards kicking. And because they were the best kickers of the game, they were the best fielders of the game. They were the best fielders in the game. So when we again got involved with the girls, we said the same thing. We didn't, like, even though they were after losing 3 All-Irelands, we didn't talk about winning an All-Ireland. In fact, 3 weeks out from the All-Ireland final in 2017, Sinead Goldrick, who would be out and out one of our warriors, talked about having to walk up the steps of the Hogan stand, that it was just something that she had to achieve with this group. And we pulled her aside and talked about, if that's what predominates your mindset from now to the All-Ireland final, not only will you not walk up the steps, but you can't play, because you've now lost sight of the steps that are key to get you there. The whole thing of going after, you know, your targets as opposed to the end result, and that dominating the mindset. And that's a key thing. So what do we chase to be the best we could possibly be? Those indicators are irrelevant. I just threw up any three. And I was saying this to Evan. I mean, that particular one, our kickouts, 70%, their kickouts, tackles, right? And it could be anything. I mean, whatever the indicators of your team are, but you must have indicators. If you don't know what you're going after, and I mean, for you know, the what was the film? Oh, not Yellow Brick Road, but I'll come back to me. But when she comes to the crossroads and meets the cat, I'll get this one as I go through it. And the question she asks the cat is, you know, which road do I take? And the cat says, well, where do you want to go? And the response is, I don't know. And he says, well, you can pretty much take any road. And that's the reality in that. If you don't know where you're going, what do you want to achieve? Like, you know, way back in 2016 All-Ireland final, Dublin's shot to score ratio against Cork in that final was 32%. You're not going to win an All-Ireland on a 32% shot to score ratio. So what is it take? What is it going to take to be successful? Is it 60%? Is it 65%? You need to know how your targets, and each time you get to a target, then you're obviously setting the bar a little bit higher. Same thing goes with tackling. The same thing goes with, keeping your own kickouts. So go after whatever it is, right? Wizard of Oz. Thank you very much, Sean. That was it, right? The bottom line is your key indicators in order for you to know where you're actually going. The next slide is my own club, underage, and very quickly on this, because a lot of people, I'm sure, when they will talk about skill sets, what do you do, or do they all have a ball each? Do they all have 2 balls each? Well, I was on our committee after I was playing senior football. I was coaching an under-10 team. I was on the executive, and you guys are those soldiers. So ultimately, my goal was that every kid on Saturday morning in the juvenile section had a football. And the chairman at the time of our club was a Monaghan man, and he told a story to the committee that night that he'd been in charge of the under-21 team in the club for the last 6 years, and they'd won football and they never lost it. And I remember thinking, that's the mindset we're trying to defeat. And when I got that picture at our underage, I plastered it all over the club wall, and underneath it I put success. And that's exactly what I see that is. But the phrase overhead it is just fantastic. Underage coaches should be humble enough to prepare the rocket without wanting to go to the moon. And what are we looking for when we take the under-10s or the Fela team? Is it to win the Fela so as we can get the senior job in the club? Or is it actually to develop that group of kids and just bring them to the highest possible level they can? Forget about trophies, forget about medals, developing their skill set to be the best version of themselves as a footballer they possibly can be. That's success. And ultimately, if we go down that road as coaches, the medals, the trophies, they'll come. And if they don't come, you're still successful. And it's a much better barometer than to judge it on what's in the cabinet. That statement we coined at the end of the 2017 season, and as long as I'm involved in coaching, I think I'll use that. The key moments of the game are decided by executing the simple things really well. And every coach at some stage asks the question, how do I improve decision making? Well, the answer to that, number one key component to that is improve the skill set of your team. And what do I mean by that? Well, you go to put the ball over the bar and someone comes onto your right foot to block you. And they turn you onto your left-hand side and you go to kick the ball. Now you don't have a left foot. You know how to put the ball over the bar. All of a sudden, one of the key decision-making that you had or should have had is taken away from you because you're not able to execute the skill. So now your repertoire of skills that you have to pick from is less. Improve your skill set, improve the repertoire or the choice that you have to make the decision, and the likelihood is you'll make a better decision. And that is absolutely key. And going back to, I'm going to give it very hard for our group to promote Cork at any stage, as you can understand, for what they were subject to over the years. And I was just briefly telling Valerie this at the start. But when we started off with the development squads, with the lads in 2002, we were the second development squad that started in Dublin. We were picking out clips of players like the Gooch or Cavan or Peter Canavan or whatever really good skill sets we could pick. So the Gooch was the dummy, Peter Canavan was the shoulder roll, Cavan was dropping the shoulder. And we'd play these for the kids and we'd say, right, so we want you to replicate this skill. We're going to work on this skill, feint or a dummy, whatever it was. And I asked Valerie that question because there's a clip up on YouTube. Jerome Quinn has put up, and Evan played it there this evening, called Queen of the Dummies. And her skill sets are fantastic. She's a beautiful dummy. And we started picking out clips for the girls when we started off again in 2017, but we couldn't pick any girls because they weren't there. We couldn't see them, right? And when I went on YouTube myself to look up, I certainly couldn't put up Valerie Mulcahy to our group. She'd already caused enough damage to them without putting it down their throat. So we started picking out the lads, but now we pick out them. We have clips of them. We have clips from, you know, shoulder rolls, we've good blocks, we've dummies. Carla Rowe has scored 3 goals in All-Ireland finals with her weaker foot. So all those things, so you'll get them as you start going on, and so be it. I mean, it was lads we were picking out of the first, and I know some people in the ladies' game saying, well, you should be picking out girls, and they're right, but you need to have the material. And at that point in time, we didn't have the material. And as you go on and you develop the material, obviously that's better for the group in general. This part comes back to the culture thing. So, you know, that whole concept of hard work, that, you know, that if you're going to do this, it's a little bit like, you know, we probably would have heard it in the city a little bit at the start, because obviously, you know, I had 2 or 3 people involved with me who were involved with the lads, and you see what, you know, they're getting, or whether it's traveling expenses or the food or the sponsored cars or whatever it is, right? But ultimately, it's got to be earned. You've got to earn it. Like, I mean, in my opinion on that one is, lads are putting 85,000 people in Croke Park. If you know, if we want respect in our game and people to come and watch, well then put on a show. Put on a show, because they'll come and watch it then. And if the standard is high enough, people will come and watch it. And that's been my approach with this group, and it's been their approach back. That's exactly the way they've gone after it. So hard work, no entitlement, nobody's entitled to anything. Come at it, give it our best, and let's move on. That one is a fantastic quote, because that's exactly, how do you improve your skills? Well, every single night we come to train, we spend 15 minutes on our skills. We break down the skills, whether it's catching, hand passing, dummies, kicking right, kicking left. We use the 2-ball exercise, the complex skills. We do that as part. We do game-based training. We do concepts of play. We include them all in our training, but we do the skills, and we do the skills. We do the skills with the lads. And I'm amazed still to hear that people who train adult teams think that players will arrive with the skill set to execute a certain skill because they're going to put the time in their own. If that was the case, Leinster Rugby, Irish Rugby, French Rugby would not have full-time skill coaches. They wouldn't have them. They wouldn't need them, because players would be doing that on their own. They don't, and they won't. And it is not possible to replicate it at a match speed either. We, during the lockdown, like many people online listening here this evening, went after loads of different skills, and we got girls to video them and send them in. And some of the skills and the ideas that they came up to do them were absolutely fantastic, but they will not execute them at match pace. They will not get to the level that it's need to be at acting on their own. They need to be in that competitive environment. It needs to be the culture. It needs to be the repeated habit of a group on a competitive basis. And it's not just kids, it's adult teams as well. And it's like everything, you know, if you just isolate kicking this week and you leave your blocking and you don't do your goal scoring or your point scoring, by the time you come back to that skill in 2 weeks' time, that skill will have gone back. So ultimately, you're trying to balance all of these skills all of the time throughout the course of the year. And they have to be parts of your training session. So the trick for us as coaches is to try and juggle them. So there'll be a stage whereby you'll go after a particular skill. It may be a weakness, say, as I said to you back where we identified it with Kerry. And then once you've gone after the skill and broken down the mechanics of the skill, that skill can be identified and practiced repetitively through game-based training. But at some stage, you must identify that skill and you must break it down for them. Do you want to play that? So we took these concepts of play out. This is the 2017 All-Ireland final. This concept is the concept of showing them the line. So this was a defensive concept where you wouldn't actually dive in. You just send people down a certain line of the field rather than giving them the center of the pitch. And then when they come back into it, they find themselves in a crowded area. And obviously, when you're in a crowded area, it's way more difficult to go by. don't think Cara was too happy with that decision. And so the clamp tackle, I'm sure there's lots of people on here tonight, and Valerie had a bit of a go about her physicality in the All-Ireland final this year. I look back over some of the teams that she played on, and I can tell you one thing: they were no shrinking violets, that's for sure. But intensity, the intensity of the game has gone up in the ladies' game, because they've got stronger, they've got faster, and realistically, in my opinion at the moment, is the rules need to be looked at a little bit, because it's awfully difficult to just take the ball off somebody with absolutely no contact to the body. And there are times, obviously, where you go over the edge, but that's what we're kind of supposed to do. We're supposed to push the limits in the game in sport. That doesn't mean that you have to be cynical or anything like that, but you do push the limits of it, right? So they were clamp tackles, where you use your sternum, where you're shepherding people to come in by using your arms and getting them to run into your sternum, which is obviously a foul. So the next part of that is the forward concepts. Don't worry about it, Evan. If it doesn't play, I can talk through it. If it doesn't. So the forward concepts, if it doesn't play, it doesn't matter. It's halfway through. But so the forward concepts were based off, two-touch football, pass and move. Evan used a clip there. If you let that go forward, you'll see it. Oh, that's back at the start again. But essentially, you used a clip from the girls' game you had, where the girl emptied out, your full forward emptied out. I don't know what term you used. Maybe it was empty out. Was that the term you used? I'm mute there.
Yeah, so we would have talked about clearing the D or emptying the D to leave the space around there. Yeah.
So what's really interesting is, I was telling you, Evan, this story earlier this evening. So we worked on the concept of emptying out that whole area that in front of the D, but filling in. So a player, the danger player, was the player then that would come into that area, right? So empty out, fill in was the term we used. But very interestingly in this, and this is the part I think that's really good for coaches to hear. Way back in 11, 12, I was about the 6th team in DCU, and we worked on these concepts with them. And then 2013, I got involved with our lads, and myself and Jim would have worked with the forwards, and we worked on the concept of movement. We were trying to get the whole concept of movement, creating space for each other, pockets, then angled runs. And Owen O'Gara, one evening, who was brave enough to say it, turned to us and went, "Lads, I haven't an eye out of where I am supposed to move." Now, most players don't say that to you. They nod their head, they go on with it, particularly on inter-county stage, because they don't want to lose face, right? But he was brave enough to say it. So if you can, as this thing plays on, you see your two-touch football, and underneath there is a term, great shots, it was something I picked up, which is a great term. What are great shots? So if you heard great shot and shouted in from the sideline, the tendency is you'd probably think the ball went over the bar, or somebody put the ball over the bar from 40 metres or whatever. But we use great shots. So if somebody shot from 33 metres under massive pressure and kicked the ball wide or dropped the ball short, we'd shout in great shots, or get the Moirishka to call into them into great shots, because great shots are taking your score in range with time. So the message was to be reiterated to the player, great shots. And it was a calm about it. There's a calm rather than roaring in. And if you ask me, look, and I there's times I'm vocal on the sideline and I wish I wasn't, but that's the little bit of the old school which you're trying to break away from, which Evan referred to earlier. And you're constantly trying to you remind yourself that, right? And if you just saw that last clip, that was an empty out, fill in, should have been a pass off for a goal, but the whole concept was perfect, right? But coming back to O'Gara, we then drew out with cones from the stop nets behind the goals. We drew an X to the 65, and we had 4 quadrants for a player to stand in, and then the 2 wide men right and left of that. And we literally ran plays unopposed where they either ran clockwise or anti-clockwise, or the full forward swapped with the centre forward and the right and left corner forward swapped places. But you could not have two people in the same quadrant. And we worked, that was the first concept of play we started with the lads on creating space. Now, that team has subsequently gone on to be the most successful team of all time. And people then ask the question, do kids understand? Or do girls understand? Or do my under six? The answer is no, they don't. And why don't they? Well, because it takes time to get to understand it. And, sometimes it takes the basic stuff like what we're talking about, like you're looking at a score there, switch the play. We had cones down the centre of the pitch. Time and again, you couldn't have a score unless you switch the ball across to another side of the field. So, there's no shame in having to do that out. And I'm delighted to be able to say to you that we were able to do that, or we had to do that with the fellas team. And then we went on to do it with the girls team. And we had to do probably more with the girls, because my experience on that one is this, and it's changing. And Valerie would be an interesting one to ask her with the experience of her group. But this has changed over the last couple of years with us, because we started asking girls to go to games with each other, to go and watch games, but not just go and watch it. Sit there and talk about the game that is unfolding in front of you. Fellas do that naturally. A lot of girls don't do that. They go and watch the game, but they don't discuss the game. And that's not a negative. That's kind of something that just has to change. It's a little bit like more fellas support ladies football than ladies. That has to change. You have to go back and there's reasons for that. I'm not pontificating here. That's a picture of Ava Rutledge. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. And she's a kid who was just about to be dropped off our squad. I was laughing to myself thinking Eamon Ryan didn't drop anybody off the squad. It is possibly the hardest thing that I've had to do over the years, is when you're telling somebody that, look, you send them back to the clubs, and we've sent every player off with different things to try and work on. You're trying to give them some, hope towards the next stage, but it's a difficult one, because ultimately, somebody's dream is shattered, and it's not just them, it's their family and their friends and everybody that supports them. But she came to me and it wasn't working out for her. And one of the things that I said to her when we met was, it doesn't seem to matter enough to you. It just doesn't seem to matter enough. And she asked to be given an opportunity as a defender, and we did. And we broke down the things for small little things like tackling and, her positioning of where, and little by little. And she went on to play in the All-Ireland Final 2018, and in my opinion, or 2018, and in my opinion, would have become one of the best defenders we had. And last year she missed out on the competition with concussion. But the repeated small things daily, and when I saw that term, she summed it up for me. This one I stole off Paul O'Connell. Jim Gavin used to refer to us about being the magpie of coaching, where if he picked up anything off anybody, and there is a bit of that in all of us, in that, if there's something we can pick up off somebody that's worth something, and Evan again used the thing is you got to know your group, and I would agree with that. Like, not everybody, just because whatever the All Blacks are doing, it doesn't mean it's the right thing for us. But Paul O'Connell, apparently, when he was with the Lions, Warren Gatland referred to his whole thing on his statement being the best at all the things that require no talent. And I just thought, what a fantastic statement, right? So we put this together as a card for our group. So what are the things that we can do? Because this, when we talk about skills or becoming a better coach, or this is part of it, like creating that culture around the group, been on time. Like, obviously there's people going to be late, and, they get stuck in traffic, or, somebody's sick, or they get delayed at work, or whatever it is. And, ultimately you have to come up with your own sanctions or otherwise. We have a leadership group who come up with some very innovative stuff. Serving food to the group was one of the things they came up with last year, which nobody particularly wanted to do. Cleaning the changing rooms, that's another one. Staying behind, doing a little bit extra, yeah, that's another one. So they come up with them, and then but most of the time, like going back to Valerie, like we don't implement the rules. They come up with them and they implement them. But that comes after time. Once your group have learned body language, like we're all the same. You go with a big sour face on you, and you've told everybody, and you've sold everyone out. It's like coming off the pitch, and okay, you're disappointed, but you start throwing your shoulders or your arms up in the air. So you've sold the group out. So what's that about? So effort, energy, attitude, passion, and we didn't put them together. They put them together. We asked them for stuff that that what could you do that would require no talent? Give us good things that we can do. From our own point of view, guys, God only knows when I first got those slides off Niall Moynihan, the years were a little bit different. But that's so true now as coaches and parents and teachers or whatever, that now it's a situation where we are living in a different world and there are massive distractions, and God only knows social media has caused its own problems for the youth of today. But there are massive distractions, and even things like I've seen over the last couple of years, you're out for a night, and we didn't go through this when I was growing up, and somebody put something up on whatever, Facebook, and you don't think, why did they do that? Like, nobody needed to know that. But they're all learners. So that's part of what we have to educate them on, because ultimately the 17-year-old or 18-year-old or 19-year-old that's coming into your squad now, they had a completely different experience, or having a completely different experience in their youth. And obviously this year and last year are testament to that than we did. All right. So that whole thing on the complex skills, the use of two footballs, the concept of staying behind, having a scoring competition, or you're practicing your free taking, or introducing the dummies, like Valerie's clips there shows really, really good. And I was telling the guys earlier that we broke down the skills of the dummy. We broke down the shoulder roll. We broke down the mulligan hand pass, as it became known to, and the two players in that, one of them is Paul Casey, who's a selector with me at the moment. So I got great pleasure in showing that one to the group, as he didn't realise what was been put in front of his eyes. But we went after those skills, and funny enough, again, come back to Goldie, one of the games that we played in, after practicing them, she did a shoulder roll and the mulligan hand pass, the dummy hand pass, and she still found herself with the player in front of her, and everybody laughed. And she, the type of character that she is, she took umbrage and said to us, well, I'd never been shown how to do a dummy before, and you expect me to be able to do it. And that's the competitive streak that's in her, which is just fantastic. But the point being, don't assume that. Don't assume like Valerie Mulcahy is able to do it because she picked it up from a different sport. Don't assume your players are going to be able to do this one, and include that as part of your coaching sessions. So that's it, really, from me. And coming back to the start, the measure of who we are is what you do, what you got. You cannot be judged on titles or medals or cups if that's not the quality of group that you have. So ultimately, bringing them to the next step, developing them as footballers and as players and as human beings. That's the measure of what it was. My year in Clare, that I spent with the lads in Colin Collins, was a massive learning curve for me, in that, and I still remember, and this is said with the utmost respect, my first training session in Cratloe, in, I think the ban was in around November, so it must have been December, that we were allowed to train. But I remember there was 16 or 17 lads training that night, and the kit man turned to me and says, "Do you want footballs?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, of course." And he laughed and he walked away. And he says, "How many do you want?" And I said, "Well, how many's training?" And he's 16 or 17. I said, "What are you laughing at?" And he says, "Jeez, Mick, we wouldn't be used to taking out the footballs out here until in around June." And he wasn't joking. He was not joking. It was the whole thing of hardship. But there's hardship. You can do hardship with a ball. You can improve your skill set and do hardship. And I was telling Evan this story that there was a documentary done on our group through 2017, and one of the things they picked out was the runs that we did up the hills in the Phoenix Park magazine hill. I was saying to Evan, coming into the All-Ireland final, 3 weeks out from it, we did those runs for 15 minutes. And it was basically harping on about the last 10 or 15 minutes of the game, which is ultimately where they had lost their All-Irelands. And we just did it as something, just a mindset thing, right? But people, I would have spoken, Jesus, you ran into the ground. And we didn't. Like, that's what, so they see that. People see that, right? So what do? We went after their skills. We went after their mindset. We went after the whole culture of the group. We improved their decision making by improving their skill sets. And to finish off on what Valerie finished off, we made sure as much as possible that they had fun. And that didn't mean that there wasn't hardship in it, but there was fun. And there's something that I would love about being involved with the girls' teams is there's way more latitude to have fun in the girls' teams than a lot of the lads' teams that I've been involved with. I would have found sometimes the fellas is way too serious, that you're nearly afraid to be even seen smiling around the thing, which is not it's not certainly the way that I'd like sport to be played. So thank you.
Okay, Mick. Yeah, that's brilliant. Huge food for thought there. And maybe I might ask Valerie and Evan to come back in again, and we'll get a few questions there from Anne-Marie. That was certainly most interesting. And I think we have still over 220 online, you know, so obviously the interest is there. Sometimes people kind of fall away towards the end of these sessions, you know, so it's great to see the interest up. So Anne-Marie, any, I know I cut some of Valerie's questions short, you know, so we'll take them all there together, and maybe an opportunity now for somebody else that mightn't have, or that might just have thought of a question. If you want to come back in with a question now through the Q&A, guys, appreciate it. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, so this one is for Mick. So Mick, can you coach vision, or is it a skill that comes naturally? And if it can be coached, what age bracket should it be introduced to players?
Vision.
Yes.
The first thing I'd answer that with is, if I use the word vision with juvenile players, they'd probably look at me as if I had 5 heads. What is vision? The only thing they'd know up here is that extra vision, but I'm not quite sure what vision would mean to them outside of that. When you talk about vision to adult players, here's an interesting thing on that, Anne-Marie. If you stood up 20 players in the room and asked them to give their definition of vision, they'd come up with different definitions. So when I'm assuming by that question, somebody vision that, you know, that you see the field. Do you see the field, right? And yeah. I'll tell you, because it's a really difficult, that's a difficult question. I understand what the person, I understand and you understand. But my point being is they don't understand, right? And again, coming back to the Owen O'Gara thing, I know they don't understand. And how do I know? Because I've seen hundreds of players stand up in front of teams, talk about game plans that we practiced. And by God, the game plan they defined to us was a different one that we were working on. And I've seen that with the top players, right? I've seen it with the top players with All-Ireland medals in their back pockets, right? So when you come back to vision, how do you coach vision? Well, the first thing is you go after concepts like, and I'll give you things that I would have picked up. Paul Flynn would have come to me, and Colin Begley, guys that I would have worked with, on scan the pitch. So the Aussies use the term scan the pitch, play with your head up. So we'd use concepts of training when you get the ball for those 4 steps, scan the pitch. Now, that's better than vision. Vision's like essentially like telling somebody you go to because you go to church, you're a godly creature. Like, what is it? So the whole thing on that is break it down and make it simple. Does that make sense, I wonder?
Just on that, Mick, and I think Valerie from basketball would be aware of something we brought in with dribbling goggles. So they use it in basketball where you put goggles on your eyes and it blocks your vision underneath. So you have to actually look ahead and look forward. And we would have done some stuff on that for like vision to me is, playing with your head up and seeing what's around you. And there is some visual aids that from other sports that we would have found would have been quite useful for that kind of thing.
Okay, so another one that has come in there as well, Mick. So how much or can you keep a lid on player-led sessions? So for example, can a player get too ahead of things and maybe burn out or waste nervous energy because they feel that they're, feel like that they need to be leading the sessions?
Player-led sessions. I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. We would have listened to the players on feedback from sessions. So during the course of a session, you're doing particular movement patterns or whatever else, and you're asking the players for feedback. How can they make that better? Do the work? Was it a good angle of run? What was the outcome? So all those things are, that's them feeding back. So you're listening to them, but leading the session. I'm trying to wonder: is that pushing the standards? Is it? And from that point of view, again, I would have said to you, 2017 when we started off, Evan talked about not quiet dressing rooms. I would say to you, it was 6 months before we heard our group speak. It was the quietest team I had ever been involved in, and part of that was their confidence levels were low, but little by little, and we kept probing them and pushing them, and little by little, they came out of themselves and they started to give more feedback and they started to take more ownership. And now I would say to you, they take way more ownership. So there's a learning in that they've to learn to get to a stage that you can't just come into a group and say, right guys, you're running the show here, I'll accommodate it. That won't happen.
And how do you come up with the goals? Is it done by the team, and must they all buy into these common goals so that they're all on the same page?
Yeah. So so if that's been the best at all the things that require no talent, or if it's actually the goals, what they want to be in that particular season. So there's a combined one there. So the rules essentially. I remember going back just a matter of 2003, we had a minor team, Dublin minor team, and we wrote the conditions for the players. And it just shows you, like in 2003, we told the players what they had to do. Where if they didn't arrive, late or alcohol or whatever else. Now I would tell you in 2021, I don't write the rules anymore. The players write the rules, and they come up with the sanctions. So now ultimately, if there was something extremely serious, which there hasn't been, but thankfully, but if there was something extremely serious, that obviously comes back in onto my lap. But no, and again, it's a learning. It can't take place overnight. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
And just continue with the team of players. How do you deal with players who have low confidence?
And that's a tough one. Ultimately, what I do is I divide my panel up amongst the coaches, and I give ownership of players to each coach. So we'd have our group divided up into 6 groups of 6, and we have people in charge of those 6 players. Now those 6 players get feedback from those coaches, but ultimately, and people have to understand this, that if a kid is really low, there's only one person that they really, really want to hear from. And that's the person who's running the show. And but sometimes you don't know that player's really low. You can't deal with it. So that's why it's really important to have some people in contact with them regularly, knowing, and even a simple thing like, you arrive into training, like, how are you? Did you have a good week? What's college like? It was work. A small little thing, walking out to the training session, and somebody feels a little bit more valued. Like, often I'd hear players, talk about, geez, he hasn't spoken to me, he hasn't said anything to me, or whatever else. And you make a conscious decision saying, geez, I better get over to them and see them on Thursday, whatever. It's just to say something.
Perfect. And just another theme that seems to be cropping up in the questions here is fitness. So with fitness at club level, would you expect a fullback to do the same as a midfielder, or would you stagger their distances? And similarly, can you build up fitness through drills and condition games, or would you need to set aside time for traditional style running?
So I'm going to answer that threefold. I saw actually a question there. I think it was from Philip Kerr as well, about using the skills as part of the warm-up. Use them as part of the warm-up. The answer is that's where I do use them. I use my warm-up to improve their skills, right? As regards, can you improve their fitness levels through conditioned games? 100%. All right. Niall Minor rang me a couple of weeks ago. I would have worked with Niall in TCU for 6 years, and he wanted feedback on GPS for a study they're doing at the moment. And my answer to him was this. I said, Niall, we don't have GPS and we haven't used it. And there's two reasons we haven't used it. One is the cost. I said, I still can't justify the cost of GPS because there's so many other things we still have to do before that becomes important, right? And he laughed and thought, I'd love that to be said on a national level. I'd love, because you have people buying GPS in clubs, spending 20 grand or 30 grand a year on GPS system because the Dublin senior footballers are the Irish rugby team. And what information are you looking for? So what's the key things you need to get back? So coming back to the fitness, right? Do everybody need the same? Well, I can certainly tell you this. Jimmy Keaveney, going back to the 70s, guys, didn't do the same training as Brian Mullins, and he was one of the best players ever to have played the game. We have players who have got to a certain age level. If we asked them to do the same stuff as all the rest, they wouldn't still be playing. So the answer is no, they don't all do the same stuff. But there's a combination of things there that needs to take place. One, you have to have a good S&C coach who understands that. Two, you have to have a manager who's willing to say to their team that, no, she isn't doing this or he isn't doing this. They've earned it. They're going to do it in different ways. They will do the hardship in different ways, but this is not benefiting their game. It is benefiting your game. Or you haven't earned the ropes yet the same way that this particular player has. But that's fair enough, and people accept that. I've had no issues from players on that one.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Mick. And just a question that has come in for Valerie. How can you introduce, you touched on accountability, how can you introduce accountability with an underage squad? Like, they may not have control over being late and so on.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a funny story on that, being late. I remember, like, we used to train on Sunday mornings out in the farm, like a UCC grounds, and Breach Corkery would inevitably run in when we all had our warm-up done nearly. But like, no one actually questioned her, because we all knew years ago when someone did, like, she was like, well, I'm late, yeah, but I've milked 150 cows. Like, what have you been doing this morning? So yeah, it is important to treat, different people differently, and understand there might be a reason for them being late. But accountability underage, I would think probably in that case, they're dependent on others for, taxing services. So maybe just at the start of the year, just have a quick chat with all the parents or guardians and just say, look, we'd love them to be out here training a quarter of an hour early. Can you have them here by then? And we'll try and ensure then at the other end that you're not all night waiting, that we'll have them, out the gap at whatever time. So that maybe you set little time limits beforehand. I think that might work with underage. And then just try and get the kid themselves to ensure that they're in the car early enough and they're not being hunted out the door, that they become accountable for their part in it.
Perfect. And just a similar question, how do you cope with county players not attending club training? Obviously county level has a high level of attendance, you know that.
Yeah, Mick didn't pick any of them, so there's one or two retired, and there's a few I've been on the panel before. Yeah, I know it's a hard one because, like, especially in the women's game, you're kind of reliant on the inter-county players to come back and create the standards or try and help maintain standards, and there can be quite a difference in standard when the inter-county players aren't there. But you have to realise that the club players, they need to realise that the inter-county players doing a lot of work, and they need to match it at club level, rather than creating a bit of tension, or trying to dissipate that maybe. But just how do you do it? I think just if you can get them even to be on the sideline now and again, and maybe engage in some of the kind of the fun elements of things, or if you are running through some tactics or concepts that they're available for those.
Great. And Marie, have you a final one maybe for Mick, and we'll wrap it up then? Thanks very much.
Yes, I have. So someone has just mentioned here that they find it difficult to get girls to go into goals, and how would you introduce girls to going into goals? And when you're at training, do you get the girls to play in all different positions on the field, not just say backs or forwards, so that they know every position?
First of all, going back many moons ago, we started girls soccer in the school, and I still remember the goalkeeper, Emma was her first name, and we had to tie her ankles together and push her over to try and get her to dive. And she'd end up diving in 3 phases: arms, hip, and then the legs would come after her. So then we got crash mats out of the sports hall, and we'd push her over, and eventually it got better and better. And ultimately, that group started under 14. They went on to win a Leinster Cup at under 18, and she was outstanding. She got picked, pulled onto the Irish soccer team after it. So, and she just shows you from the start she got. We don't have any issue with goals in this city, guys. Stephen Cluxton set the bar so bloody high. Most kids in our city want to play in goals. That is a fact, right? And I've some other time, please God, I get an opportunity to show you some of this stuff. But I have a fantastic picture of Ciara Trant and Stephen Cluxton. For anyone that knows Clucko doesn't do pictures. But I have a fantastic picture of them inside in Coppers after one of the All-Irelands. And he's his finger up at number 1. And he wasn't pointing at himself. And so we've been particularly lucky in that, but I get it from a point of view of even, underage teams and, go games, and you're rotating, trying to put people in goals. And it's gas. Ciara Trant was an outfield player. We've 2 other kids who are coaching as goalkeepers at the moment. They were both outfield players. Sometimes they want to, sometimes they don't, but ultimately it's a difficult one, no matter whether it's a county team or underage team. But we've been lucky in that Clucko made being a goalkeeper popular. And for me, it's possibly, is there a thing as the most important position, but it's certainly one of the most important positions. The second question you asked there was playing in different positions. Yes, definitely. Well, I'll put it to you. I think this is a fantastic answer to that question. Going back to 2013, Philly McMahon in the National League took 9 shots on goal, and he scored twice. And a lot of coaches or managers would pull the player and say, "You're a fucking cornerback, or you're a fullback. Stay down the pitch and do your job and give that ball." I always remember Jim turning to Philly and saying, "So you scored whatever 2 out of 10 or whatever attempts it was, right? So you're a 20% shooter at the moment. When you become a 70% shooter, you're entitled to take a go at putting the ball over the bar for all of the hard work that this group has done to put you in that position." And I thought that was just fantastic. That was coaching. For me, that was top drawer coaching, because he didn't tell Philly he wasn't to shoot. He told him he was entitled to shoot when he got to a certain level. So we used to do the scoring exercise with the backs the same way as we did with the forwards. We used to do tackling exercise with the forwards the same way as you would with the backs. So we were coaching players for each of the positions and trying to find them. And as part of the game-based stuff, like, you know, you know, in your small sided games and 6v6 or whatever else, sure, you're playing everywhere. So you start to see players, have they the capacity to line break? Have they a dummy? Have they a little bit extra that could make them, you know, or are they that player that's particularly good facing the play, rather than coming onto it? So all those things happen. I want to make this point just to, I think it's a good point to make to coaches before we finish up. This was said to me 2 years ago. This year was so different for everybody. I mean, I would have said to you, just as a matter of interest, even though, you know, we ended up in whatever, winning a trophy, but there was no fun this year. There was no fun. And if you asked me what I missed most in 2020, I would say to you, there was no fun. It was get in there, do your training section, make sure everyone's okay, temperature checks, masks, safety. There was no fun. And in 2019, at the end of the year, I'd bring our leadership group out for a lunch around Christmas time, and obviously all those things again we didn't get to do this year. But the number one thing that stuck in my mind when we went out for something to eat with them then was what the players said to us was that the energy they got back off the management team when they watched the management team getting on well together. And I thought, what an incredible message, because players see, they pick up from you. If you're in bad form or come to training with a scowl on you, they know, uh-oh. If you're down in the dumps, if your management team are bickering over something, they pick up on all of that. And it's probably like a little bit like kids in a house. Kids want to walk into a house that's in good form and there's laughter and there's safety and, you know, there's comforts around them. So the same thing goes for our teams. They want to walk into an environment that's pleasant, and it doesn't all the time have to be he and who's the funniest in the camp. I wouldn't be exactly winning too many awards in that degree. But the point being that they told us the energy they got from watching the management team, you know, interact. And I just thought it was such an important message.
Okay, and on that very positive note, I think we might wrap up. Just before we do, I put it up on the chat there. The 3 lucky winners of our Cliffs of Moher vouchers were Elaine McGovern from St. Joseph's Club in Leitrim, our own Fidelma Marnin from the West Cargales Club here in Clare, and Sheila Minahan from St. Hale